Hi everyone, it is June 5th and these cuttings have been in this pot since March 26th, which means they've been here for 71 days. And some of these cuttings are getting kind of large and crowding out the others, so I'm going to be pulling them out and seeing any root growth that we've got, and I'll move those out to soil and let this last cutting that is taking its time have some room and let it keep doing its thing. So these are just some aquarium tweezers, so I can gently pull this sphagnum moss out without yanking any delicate roots that might be forming that I can't see. I'll be starting with this cutting on the left. If I remember correctly, this cutting has one aerial root. It's fairly small in diameter. It has grown one leaf since it was put in this setup, and just trying to wiggle out some of this excess sphagnum moss that's hanging around these roots and might actually be attached. So I actually started this time lapse after I had initially put these cuttings in. I actually bought the GoPro after I bought the cuttings, so I actually bought it specifically to do this. And so I don't have any footage of putting these in, but I do plan to generally show you guys how this is all set up in case you want to do something similar. So it looks like we've got a lot of roots, so I'm going to move this cutting. It actually does not have an aerial root at all. So I have I'm kind of rolling this guy around since there's no aerial root to kind of tell it which way's down. It has been trying to figure that out, so we actually have the beginnings of a little growth nub here. You can kind of see, trying to get it lined up, that the variegation has started to move, and there's kind of this circular area that's starting to raise itself up. And eventually, that should be the beginning of a leaf once it decides to keep growing. And let's see here, let's see if we can dig this little guy out. So I've got a little bit of grass growing, it looks like. And I apologize that there seem to have been some soil mats hanging out in here for the past couple months. I've tried to get them out whenever I have seen them, but they have persisted. So all that is in here is just saturated sphagnum moss, and that's it. I saturated it once right when I put this together, and I have not watered it since then. So as the moisture has evaporated from the moss, that has prompted the aerial roots to grow some water roots and actually go looking for more water, which is great for when I transition this to soil. It will have more roots developed. And I'm being very gentle here, trying to work around these gentle water roots and remove as much of this extra moss as I can. But I also don't want to damage anything, so I'm not pulling too hard. Just anything that wants to let go easily. Pull that out. But you can see from this short little aerial root, we've got a lot of water roots that have grown to go looking for moisture to support this leaf that has grown. So I don't want to pull too hard. So some of these might stay just because it seems pretty well latched on. But you can see all of these little water roots that have grown, which will help support this beautiful leaf that we have grown for the past couple months. So, and we'll keep working on this off camera just to try and get some of the moss off. Now, let's see here. So this cutting has 2 leaves that have grown, and we've got one in the beginning of a second one here. So let's see what these are doing. Looks like this one's going to be easier to pull out rather than this 2-leaf cutting alternate, so you can see a little bit better. But we have got, so this cutting, we have 1 leaf that has grown. That this cutting had 2 aerial roots, so it actually had a better means of getting moisture into the stem to promote growth, which is great. It's what we want. Get some of this out of this way. So part of why I chose this method is it made sense to me coming from a biological standpoint, in that, you know, starting with saturated moss, it has what it needs, but then by allowing it to, the moisture in the moss to evaporate, it gets the humidity that this plant wants, since it's a tropical plant, and then also encourages the roots to realize, oh, I don't have the moisture that I once had when I first ended up in this situation. So I'm going to start growing to see if I can find any more moisture just a little farther away. So, like I said before, I have not added any water since I first put these in here 71 days ago, but these are just set up. This one's taking a little more effort to dig out, but this is just a slotted orchid pot, so the moisture can escape not only from the top, but also through the sides and the bottom as well. So you can see all of the slots in the bottom. And actually, we have some roots growing out the bottom too, which is great. It means we have a really expansive root system that we're working with. So knowing that, I'm going to try and take these out together because I don't know how intertwined they are. So you can actually see this larger cutting actually has the beginnings of a new aerial root growing, which is great. So let's see, trying to be gentle with this. Don't know how this moss has shifted and how tight it might be or where any roots might be. So I'm kind of making a mess, which I will pick up later, but I mainly just want to see if I can untangle these two cuttings. So I started this as an experiment to myself, not really intending to really share this with anybody, but there's not a lot of information and kind of tracking of how stem cuttings grow and how they behave, as far as actually being able to check in, other than, you know, photos and some general accounts of people making educated guesses on what the best way to do things are. So decided to kind of film this, thinking it might be useful for anyone else who might be thinking about using this growth method and propagation method. So this moss, after being in here for a few months now, is actually still a little bit moist, but it's definitely drier than when it first went into this setup. So it shows that my initial idea was good. Think of that the moisture in the moss would evaporate and create the humidity that I was going for, thinking that these would enjoy it, and that, I don't know how well you can tell, but I have roots all through here. I've got roots here, interlacing all through here, so I am going to just sit and try to separate these as gently as possible, but we do have some beautiful leaf growth. Get that one. So I will work on separating these, speed this up, and come back. have finally separated this cutting from the other one. We've got a baby leaf coming in. So that's coming in here. So this cutting is rather small in diameter as far as the stem part is concerned, but we do have two aerial roots which really helped provide moisture into the cutting to allow it to grow quickly. And we can see this root structure that was able to grow into the moss. It was kind of difficult to tell the difference between moss and an actual root, which some of this might still be moss. I think this part is. I think this part is too. Get that out of there. But you can see it's really, in a rather short time, has grown quite the root network. So, very happy with this one. Once again, this is what the leaf looks like, and I'll be happy to see that continuing to grow. And then this was the largest diameter cutting that I received, but it only had one aerial root, but it was a rather large aerial root that you can see here. Once again, I think this is moss. It's kind of difficult to tell the difference between moss and roots, but even still, that's moss, that's moss, that's moss. But even still, you know, some of this is moss, but it's still fairly large root network that has sprung from multiple points to grow into moss. So this was sitting on top of the soil like this, so the root actually went all the way through. So it had lots of surface area to realize that it was on top of soil. We've actually got a new root growing here, so that's great. This cutting already has two beautiful leaves with some great variegation going through them. This one is the second leaf that just grew, and this is the first leaf. So very, very happy with how this is turning out, and we'll be excited to see how this one continues to grow. And let's clean up the first one. So this is a smaller diameter cutting that we pulled out first. It's got a very short aerial root, but it was still able to grow a fairly large root network from a couple points near the end. So I'm very happy with how that's turned out. It does seem like the diameter of the stem itself, as well as the size of the aerial root, really influence how quickly these stem cuttings take off, which makes sense as far as the amount of matter that is within these growth nodes and the water system that these roots, aerial roots, provide will influence how quickly it will be able to grow. So this one's it's not as well shaped as the other leaves, but still quite nice. And be excited to see what the next leaves look like. This one's got a lot of variegation throughout the leaf, so that is a good sign for future leaves to come, and excited to see where that goes. So since one stem still hasn't grown a leaf yet, what I'm going to do, so this is a large stem, which is great, but there is not an aerial root on it to help provide moisture. So what I am going to do is I'm going to set everything back up with the moss that I had been using already. I'm going to re-soak the moss, I believe, and set it back up and just let this guy keep going. So no signs of root rot or end stem rot, I mean, which is a good sign. And I think just since there's no aerial root to help get moisture in, it needs more time to do what it needs to do, and so we're just going to let it keep going. So since I have one stem that does not have an aerial root, I am going to essentially recreate what I did initially with setting up all of them and just kind of walk you through. So I have a slotted orchid pot. Could do a smaller one. Since this is going to be going long term, I like the idea of having a larger one so that there's more moisture to let this process keep going for a long time. If there's only a little bit of moss, it would eventually dry out much quicker than this amount of moss would. So essentially all I did with all of the cuttings at the beginning is I saturated the sphagnum moss, and this is just a bowl of water that I've put some of the previous moss in, and let it sit and soak, and pick up the wet moss, squeeze out the excess so that it is no longer dripping, and then sprinkle it in and just loosely let it fall in so it's not super densely packed, so that those roots can grow out without much fight. So I'll just keep doing this and refill it and get everything set back up. And that's it. I will leave it alone for another couple months and let it do its thing, and hopefully here soon we will have another leaf. So that's it. I don't touch it. I don't water it. That's it. Just leave it be. It's under some grow lights that are on 24/7, and then some just ambient room light that obviously changes as the sun's up or down. And that's the entire setup. Thanks, guys.